Good afternoon, everyone, and this is a PhD preparation or the preparation for the entrance exam course. My name is again Dr. Baisham, and I'm a research assistant at Jaffa University. So let's start first. We talk about the nature of the PhD entrance exam. So first, as I said, it's a very highly competitive in nature. So the exam is not for some just to say I have succeeded or just to answer. No, it's just to stand above the rest. And of course, most of the time, I do recall that it happened only once. That's the answers. The questions were like direct questions in grammar. I believe it happened once. But most of the time, all of the years, the questions were in the form, the answers, they're supposed to be in the form of an essay. So, and of course, the student has to aim for perfection in answering, minding all aspects. When you say you have to be so you have to be so, I mean, you aiming for something like this so perfect. Minding what? The first thing that you need to really consider is your handwriting. If you believe that your handwriting is really not up to the level, I mean, I think that you should go and try to practice writing. That's why it's really imperative that now you get like really good pens and you're trying to write and rewrite again and again. So at least your handwriting is going to be like acceptable, because believe me, it makes a difference when you have someone who's going to correct your paper, and your paper is really, I mean, is clean and there is no strike throws, etc. So this is going to give you, of course, an edge over so many people in this regard. Number two is the form of the essay. I mean, when you say an essay, essay is so clearly it's that you will have the introduction, you will have body paragraphs, and you will have also the conclusion. I mean, this is the form of essay, no, but at least when I open your exam paper, I should see this form. I mean, visually, by my eyes, I can see it, because sometimes you see those students, they mix everything together. I mean, you can't tell where is the introduction from the body or from the paragraph, because simply there is no space between paragraphs. So I really should take care of this. I mean, the first thing any examiner is going to open your paper without before reading the handwriting should impress, and the form. So I can see clearly that okay, so this is the introduction, these are the body paragraphs, and this is the conclusion. And this you can do it easily by just leaving, for example, 2 lines spacing between the introduction and the first paragraph, and you can leave, for example, 1 line of spacing. You can calculate that, for example, in your paper. So this is what you do. So the form. And number three, the length. Sometimes you get this question, should I write more? Should I write a lot? Or should I write just a very precise answer? No, this in fact depends. If the question is specifically states that, for example, you need to write like, for example, 300 words, okay, now you have a very precise number. But if the question is open and just they are going to tell you discuss a certain idea, I mean, simply when you heard the word discuss or uh, talk about it, comment, so there is no limit. So simply saying talk about it. And in my experience, for example, if I'm correcting and I get a paper like really full of information, I will say, oh, I have to read this. And if I see someone giving me 2 papers, I say, whoa. So these 2 papers, then, I mean, there is something, I mean, inside. I have to read. And usually, someone who's so confident in writing 2 papers, usually they succeed because they were so confident. I mean, there's no rule in this regard, but still, usually teachers are impressed by the length. So unless there is like you are instructed specifically not to write, for example, more than 50 lines, it always, I believe that the more is better. Concerning this time, when you write, remember this, you are not writing as a master to students. I mean, you have graduated. Now you are writing, you should have like this advanced side. So you are writing to be a doctor. I mean, you are one usually you are hours from being a doctor. It's just a matter of hours before from the exam to the result. So it's your life is going to change. So your style should not be like this kind of student simple style. You try to be better. Remember that you are competing with maybe 500 students, and all these students they are going to write in with different styles. So you need to be better in this regard. So styles, your choice of words, and everything has to be really, really careful. Now, spelling mistakes. Oh, I don't think that spelling mistakes are really, really tolerated. I mean, if you commit one spelling mistakes at the level of introduction, usually you are doomed. I mean, you don't expect to win. Maybe in the development, you write one spelling mistakes and commit it, so maybe it's going to be overlooked because maybe you have already impressed the examiner and the level of the introduction. But if you make spelling mistakes, for example, let's say in the first sentence started without, for example, capital letter, maybe. I mean, you have already given us a bad impression from the start, and don't expect to win with that. And of course, we're talking about the quality of information. When these are all good, I mean, your handwriting is really shining, the form, the length, your style is so good, there are no spelling mistakes. Teachers will look at your quality of them, your information. I mean, if they are really consistent with the question or not, then usually, if these are all met, means that you are already among the top students in that exam, and there is a chance that you will succeed. Of course, we say that this is a competition. For example, we can have 10 students with all these who they meet all these criteria. So you will have a problem, of course, in this. Now let's go to the selection of the university. We heard recently about the project, so we know which universities you are going to pass your exam. I'm going to highlight just one particular thing and how can you take benefits from this. Let's look, for example, at this. We have the University of Schliff, for example, and we can check that they have a project in English. And you see, most students they are going to just concentrate in this is that there are 9 chances, and there is 3 chances for me. For example, if I'm going to go to didactic, and you can see here didactic, and we have also kind of a literary text, so it's kind of literature also, or maybe discourse analysis. It's kind of vague. I'm not sure what they mean here. But what you should mind first that you look at this H here. The H means simply this project is new. I mean, so this is the first time this project is open. What I want you to also to check is the name of the head of the project. And here we have Ben Said Faiza. So Ben Said Faiza, this name must be so important. It should be important to you. Because one of the things that you need to do is that you need to go to the internet and you need to go to and look for some kind of all the publication of this university teacher, because there is in regulation for a project to be admitted, the teacher must be a professor. So I can assure that this teacher is a professor, and a professor at the university, at least they must have, like, for example, articles, maybe books. You need to look for this because these are going to give you a very solid idea about what you are going to see. See, if I'm going to be a teacher, I'm going to ask you a question. Usually, these questions are going to be related to my field of study, and this is the usual thing. Of course, it's not necessarily that the teacher is going to ask the question, there will be a jury. But usually, since, for example, in this case, she is the head of the project, you can expect that the question is going to be related to their field of study. It's also going to help, for example, you might find dissertations, you find thesis supervised by this teacher, you understand what they are talking about, their field of study. This is also going to really help you. And of course, if you can, for example, you can discover set a pattern in their writing, and you can use this as in your advantage. And when you write your answer, you try to also trying to reflect this kind of thinking This may, for example, give you a very better chance in winning. So you should always pay attention I said, to the head of the project because it's so important. And this age, since it's a new project, no, well, nothing can be done about this. I'm going to give you another example. In this case, we have the University of Tlemcen, and we have also English this year. This is all 2021. And we have here, sorry, we have the R2. So, and we have Hamza Gig, let's see, I think this is the name. And we have R2. R2 means that this project was opened 2 times ago, 2 times already. So this year is going to be the third time. This, in fact, is going to help me if I want to get in contact with the people that they already did the exam 2 years ago and ask about what kind of questions they deal with. I mean, I try or just to talk with them and see, for example, what kind of questions I might expect, for example. So this R2 is going really to help you. So you will know that there are already people in this project. So we have like now it's two we have two groups already studying. So this, in fact, can help you. So please pay attention to this information because it can be crucial. The next thing, let's talk about directly. I'm trying to be so practical. Let's talk about the essay format. So usually it's the introduction, body paragraphs, and the conclusion. What do you want in your introduction? It's usually that the hook statement. Usually one of the difficult things, I mean, in writing is that first sentence. Because the first sentence is, in fact, is going to tell a lot. So you have the first sentence. It's what? It's usually a sentence to situate the answer in a broad problem. For example, if we're talking about didactics and we're talking about, for example, problems with learners, you need to find a sentence that's going to reflect this. If we are talking about teaching approaches, the history, we need a sentence that highlight that we have so many approaches and methods. So you had a broad problem or the field of concern. Then, of course, I do believe that all of you had courses in writing. You will need the thesis statement. Thesis statement is that sentence that usually is going to directly address the question. That should be their introduction. Then there is something number three. Some people they might not agree with me in this regard. It's an implicit outline on the ideas to be developed. Sometimes it's implicit. Sometimes some people can refer to be explicit. So it's like you talk about the ideas that you are going to deal with in the body in the body paragraphs. It's like I need to read the introduction and I just feel that what you are going to talk about in the intro in the development. This is for me personally, it's a very good practice because it leaves anyone who's correcting your paper with a good impression and about what you are going to do later. And why I'm saying this, because let's face it, and I want to be really concerning this. I mean, we are loading a few teachers with 500 papers, for example, to correct in a very brief time. I mean, I expect teachers to be so quick in correcting these papers. So if you can't impress them at the level of the introduction, I think you will have a very serious problem. So don't leave your nice words, your shiny words to the end. No, you need to impress at the first sentence, second sentence. And this is also another problem for those who they start their answer like from the third sentence, or they try to make long introductory sentences. Be careful. You might lose the teacher from the second sentence. You need to quickly address the question from the first to the second sentence. You need to find some good words, some really formal sentences. You need to impress from the first or second sentence. It's like someone, it's like appearance. When you meet someone dressing so well, I mean, you need that. We need that because we need to convince that who's correcting your paper that, hey, continue reading. It's really good. Because I believe that teachers, they are really stressed that day, and you can imagine the situation. In the body paragraph, we need what? In each idea mentioned in the introduction has to be developed explicitly. And I say explicitly in a paragraph. So for example, if you mention If you are talking, for example, about the use or the advantage, for example, of a competency-based approach, and you mention the word advantage, I need to see a paragraph that really deals with the advantages. If you see, for example, you give me a paragraph and you say there is an issue about certain point, I need to see that paragraph. It has to be really there. I mean, if you're talking about argument and counter argument, if either you put them in one paragraph and they're so clearly organized, or you need to dedicate one paragraph for the argument and one paragraph for the counter argument. And it never mix ideas in at the level of one paragraph. And number two, he said extra paragraphs can be added when needed to inject arguments and counter argument. Sometimes we write one idea. For example, I'm going to talk about, let's say, assessment. I'm going to talk about assessment in one paragraph. And I need, because the paragraph cannot be long, I should avoid this. So I need another paragraph just to talk about the examples. This is also a good thing. Now, each paragraph has to tackle one idea. This is so imperative. And moving from major ideas in a single paragraph, this is a very bad practice. I mean, sometimes you read one paragraph and you feel that in that paragraph there are 3, 4 ideas, just a mixture. And well, this is usually where you lose the person who's correcting your paper. The conclusion. Remember one thing. You have a question. Usually in a quote or anything, it's a question. So the question has to be answered. So the conclusion is what? So remind the reader of the main issue that started the debate. I mean, usually there will be an issue, and around that issue, we will have this, you will write your essay. So try to remind us, what was the problem that really started writing this essay? And once you remind us of this, summarize your argument to enforce your answer. Remember, because because I was writing arguments, counter arguments, giving definition, not just to tell you that I know, no, just to tell you to enforce my idea concerning that question. For example, if your question is what is your opinion, or if it's what is your opinion, or what do you think, for example, if it's A or B, if all along the essay you were giving me the arguments for example, the A, or the argument for the B, or the argument for both. So be careful. Remember, don't forget the question, because this is the problem where most students, it's like they get drifted with the answer, with the words, and even when they really know the ideas and everything, but just they get drifted and they forget about the question itself. So this where you really should remember what was the question. Always never forget it. So this is when it comes the essay format. So at least I want now to go. I want to go to something really practical, because I told you this. It's not going to be a very long. Going to be a very long course, but at least I'm trying to give you something that is so practical. Let's look at this question: is how to answer. The teacher's role in the classroom has been shifting over time from strict controller to facilitator. Discuss and illustrate the teacher's role through the most appropriate approaches and methods. I think this question was asked in 2013. And it is a question, yes, from Ph.D., one of the Ph.D. exams, entrance exam. So I have at least listed few things that you need to remember. Of course, these are just I'm correcting my experience from correcting exam papers, but you can add more. So one, and this is so important, no matter how long the question is, it remains so simple, and it must hide inside a simple WH or yes or no question. Sometimes you're presented with this kind of a long question, a long quotation, and you sometimes say, hey, what is the question? You should find what is the simple form, because we have WH question like where, when, what, where, and yes or no. So it must be there. I mean, don't be fooled by all these wordiness and etc. So you have to find it. Number two, you must discover the intention behind the question, the implicit and the explicit one. You see, sometimes when you are asked a question, for example, if I come to you now and approach you and I said, for example, what do you think about online teaching? If I ask you about what do you think about online teaching at this moment, you can tell me a lot about it. You can talk about it, like, for example, you define it. You say, what do you think about it? You give me the argument, and you give me also the counter argument. But since I asked you about it now, and with this current status, for example, we have a pandemic, it's like implicitly maybe I'm telling you, hey, what do you think about it now with the coronavirus, for example? I see that's an implicit intention. So I want you to always to look for that intention. I mean, yes, the question is clear, everything is there, and I can answer it. But where is the implicit intention behind it? What is the goal really? Why did you ask me this question? I mean, for example, in this instance, do you think that the role of teacher is changing, is good, is bad? What is it? This is something you really should ask yourself. And in fact, answering this question really can make you like you make your essay better. Number three, identify the important ideas and related ones that need to be tackled. Of course, it's quite easy. Uh, as you can see, for example, it's quite obvious that you need to talk about this because you need ideas, you need to brainstorm, see what's everything related to this concept. Number four, think of the argument and the counter argument. Always ask yourself if you are answering. I mean, is it the only way to look at the answer? Sometimes you just need like different views. I mean, you can be with, you can be against, you can be just neither of that. So ask yourself, because one of the things that really makes me say that this student really is a good thinker and he knows what he's doing, what she's doing, that when I find that they're giving me different arguments, it's not always the time to say, no, it's no, this is yes and this is no. So think like a third person. And number five, think of the conclusion before you start. Never start an essay, especially an essay, you have 1 hour and a half and you just don't know what is the conclusion. Before even I start, I have to know what's my end goal? What do I want to say? For example, if I start a topic and I have the arguments and counter arguments, and I know that, for example, I am put in a situation and there is a dichotomy. Let's say, for example, the dichotomy of teaching grammar or teaching, well, for example, yes, form or function. This dichotomy is really put there. So which one should I choose? I should know before I go to which one I should. If I have the arguments that I need both of them, okay, so I have good. If I think no, I'm going to choose one, and I have arguments that really support this. So from the start, because you are not conducting a research here, you are writing something you already know. Number six is devise an outline, minding the number of paragraphs and time allocation. You have 1 hour and a half, and usually you have few minutes lost from it because of stress and everything, anxiety, and you need to think about the answer. As I told you, I expect that someone you already know the answer because you already know all the ideas. It's just a matter of how I'm going to organize these ideas. If it comes here, the outline and the number of paragraphs, and if they say if I do have time. You don't want to start something that's going to take you 2 hours and you don't have that time. So even if your answer is really perfect, but you did not have time to finish, you will fail. And believe me, if a teacher finds a paper missing and they're missing parts of the information, so believe me, you will not succeed. So because we say it's incomplete, something complete, maybe when it's not that good, is better than something which is perfect but not complete. What I'm going to do here, we are going to try to answer this question. I am, in fact, going to try to answer. I give you just my personal view, and of course, you later you can discuss this. So let's start from the first one. I'm going to tackle all these elements. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we start from number one. As I said, no matter how long the question is, it remains so simple and it must hide a simple WH or yes or no question. Now, in this case, if we read, we see that we are instructed to discuss and we are instructed to illustrate. Now, discuss is a bit of a problem. So if you look at the word discuss, I mean, it tells a lot. It's talk about, contend, address, canvas, recite, have talk with, delay, debate. So the word discuss is really problematic. I mean, it's as if they are going to telling you, hey, just talk. I mean, the more, the better. So Discuss entails all the WH questions. So inside discuss, there is where, there is when, there is how, there is yes, there is no. Everything is there. So pay attention to this. And illustrate is much simpler. So illustrate just provide me with examples. So if I'm looking at this and say discuss and illustrate, it's like, hey, talk about everything you know about teacher role, this shift, and this approaches and method, everything. And just try to do your best and make everything connected. Illustrate, give us examples. So this is one, this is a really kind of a difficult question when I have to talk about everything. Yes, it can be difficult, but at the same time, I think it's better than limiting myself. So I am free to talk. So it all depends on me and how can I address this. Number two, it's number two. We are still in the ideas. So if I want to put some kind of questions, because what I'm doing is I'm trying to answer to raise more questions so I can understand. So question number one: what is the role of the teacher, for example? Yes, because I'm supposed to talk about it. What are approaches and methods? Okay, so I have to mention something like this. And how the role of the teacher is related to approaches and method. And how is the role? Sorry, how is the role is approaches and method? Okay, so if we are talking about these two, they must be connected. So I should talk about it. And why the role of the teachers is shifting. Okay, so we said there is a shift, so there must be why. Of course, it's we can say why and how did it start and where is it going. All these questions can be answered. Why it is still in progress and not complete yet? So why is it still in progress and not a complete shift? This is also kind of a question. When we say, for example, something is shifting, means that the shift is still in progress. I can raise a question. Why is it in progress? And then the shift, is it negative or positive? This is one of the questions also that I can raise here. What kind of examples I can provide, more preferably from real context? Of course, if you are going to give examples, it's better to give the examples from your own society. So you can add more questions, but be careful. The more questions you are going to raise, the more time you are going to allocate for the outline. And this is going to be kind of waste of time, but you should try to manage. So this is number one. Number two, we said you must discover the intention behind the question, the implicit and the explicit one. Of course, this can be a bit of subjective, but at least I say, for example, understanding this can vary from a person to another. Number two, the examiner can simply want to talk about how the role of teachers has changed. I can say, for example, someone is going to say, okay, so just how the role of the teacher, so you are going just to give us different roles of teachers throughout the history. Maybe. Maybe the emphasis on the why, on the reasons that led to this change. Maybe the question doesn't really want to talk about, these roles, but want to talk about, why. So here, of course, if you emphasize on each one, the structure of your essay is going to change a bit. So you have to be so careful. This because it can change what we call the tone of the writer. Yes, you are going to present me kind of information all related to the question, but even your tone when answering, that can determine how good is your essay. And number three, identify the important ideas related one that need to be tackled. So, of course, approaches and method, relationship with the role of the teacher, roles of the teacher, relation with other aspects of teaching, they are all connected, reasons for the shift in roles, and advantages and disadvantages, of course. This is going to lead me to number four. As I said, think about arguments and counter arguments because these are usually going to fuel your work. So if I look here, I have this shift. When you say shift, there is a change. So if this is a change and it's like a trend, it must sure it has some kind of advantages. So I have to talk about advantages. But be careful not to get caught just in the advantages. Where is the disadvantages? Maybe we don't have disadvantages. Maybe we have repercussions of this shift. There is repercussion. Maybe something else is changing because of this shift. So you need to think about it and you try to reflect it in your final essay. Okay, so we talked about how we can do it. Now let's go and try to. I'm going to this essay. I have written it, and I want to share it with you. Of course, we can debate it. You can cast your opinion about it, but this is what I did here. So let me read and try to dissect what I did. So nowadays, often teachers are asked to assume different roles from facilitators, motivators, and mentors. So this is the first sentence. The first sentence, what I did, I just said, yes, indeed, this is the role of teachers today. You can do it different way. For example, you can start asserting that there is a shift, and you talk about like the shift from the past to now, or just like I did, you just the reader, tell the reader that this is the roles of the teacher. What I want you to pay attention here, the choice of words. As I said, choice of words should not be random. For example, nowadays often teachers are asked to assume. So it's better if you go into the dictionaries, our collocation dictionary, see what kind of words go with the word roles of teachers. So usually you would use the word assumes. You have to be very careful in your words. However, so starting from the second sentence, I put however mean that there is kind of an issue. This was not always the case, as teachers were often seen as strict controllers in class. So what I did, I contrasted this. So this is the present, this is the past. Such transformation is due to a marked change in methods and approaches to teaching and learning. So this is the thesis statement. What I said here, that this change is because of the change in methods and approaches. So this says everything, that there is a change in teaching, in the role of teachers. It's due to change in approaches and teaching. Yet, I am also trying to inject another problem. The discussion about teachers cannot be separated from other elements in the teaching learning process. So what I'm saying here, simply, I just want to say that, hey, I don't want to talk only about teachers. The talk about teachers is going to bring something else, which is the role of learners, the repercussion on classroom activities. So I have this, maybe someone say, oh, okay, now you are going out of topic, and maybe yes, but at the level of introduction, this is what I'm saying, and I have to prove that this introduction is reflected in my body paragraph. Now let's go to the body paragraph. As I told you, each paragraph must contain a very clear idea. If you write one paragraph which contains two more ideas, you will have a problem. This paragraph I written here has this idea, the link between approaches and the role of the teacher. So what I wrote here, before delving further into methods and approaches, it's imperative to establish the link between the letter and teacher's role. So what I'm saying here, that I want to say that there is a link. There's a link between methods and approaches and the role of teacher. In this regard, what I did here is I inserted a quote, because you need to insert kind of a quote referencing, and this is important because it's going to give you an edge, going to give you an extra mark when it comes to your essay. So in this, Richard and Rogers, 1986, page 43, said that teachers' roles are related ultimately both to assumptions both about language and language learning at the level of approaches. So they are really neatly connected. So these two, I mean, two figures in didactics, they said they are related. So I'm backing my words, I mean, with this quote. Thus, methods and approaches are neatly related to the function of the teachers as what? So how they are related? I mean, this is the answer here, as they determine what? The degree of control the teacher has over how learning takes place, what to be taught, and how. And I think I took this some from internet from. So you can pick two words, two sentences, phrases, just in your essay, because here it's really that it's a highly formal academic paper, but at least you can do it. So what we did here, I gave a link. I said, where is the link between the approaches and the role of the teacher and how it's related? How it's related is simply it's mentioned in this section. Now, that also has implication for the interaction pattern that will develop between teachers and learners, because I said at the level of introduction, because that's anything happen at the level of the teacher is related, of course, with learner. Consequently, the ongoing change in the status and function of teachers reflected change in our understanding of what constitutes effective teaching. Because at the end, why there is a change in the role of the teacher? Because we think effective teaching is not neatly related to just teachers, but also teachers and learners. And this is the idea that I wanted to reflect here very briefly. Paragraph number 2 is examples. I'm providing examples related to the previous paragraph. So what I did, I said here, for instance, in traditional methods, such as the grammar translation method, the primary role of the teacher is to provide translation of new grammatical items, answer student questions about the meaning of items, to monitor students' work, for grammatical accuracy, to develop translation activity. Also, I think I took this. So this is the role of the teacher in that method. The philosophy that drives this method is simply that language learning is no more than memorization of grammatical rule. And here comes a very important thing because, see, our understanding of language itself has changed. So just from understanding that language was simple some grammatical rules to be recited, that was the grammar translation method, to now to something new and in modern approaches. The teacher is the source of knowledge. This is in the past. She or he has to express uh, has exerted strict control has to exert strict control over the classroom. The same can also be said about audiolingual method, in which is based on the theory that all language skills are taught through oral practice, repetition, learning by analogy. So the teacher is looked at as the sage in this days, a role model. This was phrase was asked, I think, in 2020 in I think Lagwat or something. So I used it. So this is example of how was the role of the teacher in the past, all in this paragraph. Moving to the second paragraph, reasons behind the change. Nevertheless, so I'm trying to bring in new ideas. With the growing realization that the emphasis on teaching and teachers does not necessarily guarantee learning, and this is in fact what drives all modern approaches, that it's not all about teaching, there was a shift to communicative approaches. So we have a new approaches. Here, language learning is looked at as a creative process in which communicative competence is given priority. Learners are asked to discover answers themselves rather than simply asking for it from the teacher. You see here, I am establishing a link again to learners, because learners are no longer just required to sit and listen, but they themselves they have to discover the answer. So they have more tasks to do than the teacher. Therefore, the role of the letter, which is the teacher in this case, has to shift in accordance. See, that's because of we want to emphasize learning, and we are no longer focusing on the teacher, so focusing on learners, so everything is going to change. So he or she, that the teacher, has to facilitate learning by being a motivator. You simply look for the definition of a motivator on the internet. Is a person who promotes interest and enthusiasm. A mentor, a role model who shares information as well as provide guidance, motivation, emotional support, and resources. So this paragraph, what I did two things. The first idea is why the role changed, and next idea, which is so related that I put them together, is, I mean, why? And we said why, and what is this new role the teacher has to take? So there are everything is connected in this paragraph. There is something else I want to say, which is outside of the scope of this question. You see, when you prepare something like this, a paragraph like this, it's going to be printed in your mind. Next day, for example, if we have a question that is going, you will need to talk about the role of teachers or the role of learners, even if you want to talk about talk about the talk about, for example, new roles of teachers. You can simply use this paragraph again. I'm going to answer questions later when I finish. And next we have the next paragraph. The next paragraph, as I told you, since there is a change, and this change is not complete. I mean, there must be something. I mean, Is it just because it needs time to be completed, or there is kind of resistance? What I did here in this paragraph is that I said that there is kind of resistance to this change. This is what I tried to mention. And this paragraph, I rely on this paragraph that I'm going to really make my essay stand from the rest. So the change in the role of teacher does not mean that the teacher is no longer required to be a controller. So I'm trying to give the counter argument. So I was saying that, okay, we have communicative approaches. Now the teacher has to be a mentor, etc. Then I'm saying, no, sometimes we need to be controllers. Why? In fact, research shows that some teachers are still resistant to modern approaches, and they still implement traditional approaches due to several reasons. I need to mention them. First, in one, the nature of the content to be taught sometimes can compel the teacher to use certain traditional approaches and strict the role of learners. So sometimes you want to teach something and you have to revert back to traditional way of teaching. Therefore, he or she has to be at the center of the classroom again. So this is a reason. Second, as stated above, any alteration on the role of the teacher implies a change in the function of learners and vice versa. Sometimes when we say that the teacher has to change his role or her role, of course, we said directly that change has to be within will also be visible with learners. So in this case, therefore, if learners are not cooperative in communicative approaches, that would create issues. So if I say that, for example, I want to be that teacher who's a mentor, just to be a supporter, of course, I expect my learners to do the same thing, and my learners are going to work more. Therefore, if learners are not cooperative in communicative approaches, that would create issues when no one is at the center of the classroom. We are saying that teachers should not be at the center, so someone should occupy the center of the classroom, and if it's not going to happen, that's will be a problem. Thus, facing this situation, the teacher has to roll back to a more traditional way of teaching. So this is a kind of a problem that, in fact, can sometimes make teachers resistant or can just hinder this process of this change. So this is paragraph 4. So remember, I wrote an introduction. I wrote 4 paragraphs. And let me go and we review them quickly. So I wrote the introduction, and paragraph 1 we talked about the link of approaches. Paragraph 2 we talked about kind of examples. And paragraph 3, we talked about reasons behind the change and the new roles of teachers. And paragraph 4, we talked about the resistance to this change. So the last one is the conclusion. So the conclusion, we said, finally, there is no question there is an inextricable link between method approaches to teaching and teacher role. The marked shift in our understanding of language learning has affected the function and the status of teachers in the classroom, from strict controls and traditional methods and to in modern classrooms. Still, even with the advantages of communicative approach, new roles of teachers as strict control did not disappear from our schools, either due to the nature of content to be taught or learners' readiness to the new approaches. As you can see that the conclusion is kind of a summary of all what I did, because the question was like discuss and illustrate. I have here 4 paragraphs plus an introduction plus conclusion. If you want to write it with your hand, that's going really to take really some good space. So this is considered to be like a lengthy essay. Now someone will ask the question and say, hey, how can I write this essay during the exam? 1 hour and a half, how can I think about this? As I told you earlier, you don't have time to think about this. This is where preparation is so important. You will be so prepared. You know already, you have revised, for example, you have revised the roles of learners, roles of teachers, approaches, methods. Everything is there. I mean, when you go to that exam, you just need to construct your ideas. Maybe you are going to inject 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs that you are going to write something that is tailored for that question in particular. This essay is also not perfect. There still is something missing in this essay. I said, what is missing in this essay is concrete examples of activities in the classroom. I feel that my essay here really doesn't have like very good examples. I mean, I can write some examples of what happened inside the real classroom. Maybe I reflect on really what happened in my classroom specifically. So this is can be good. So that's why we need better contextualized examples, and because we need to uh, impress the person who is correcting. So this is what I did today. So I tried to put one question and try to show you how to answer. So at least this is the end of the presentation. Thank you so much.